Hello friends, welcome to Welcome IS. We are continuing our Indian Express Demystified series. First of all, about me, I am Dr. Rajesh Kumar Mohan. I have done my MBBS from Government Medical College and Hospital, Chandigarh, and I have worked in Indian Node in Inspectory Health Services for approximately 3 years. This is my fifth attempt in civil services examination. I have also qualified Uttar Pradesh Public Service Commission. So today, now Indian Express Demystified series, we will be continuing. We will be taking up newspapers from 6th to 11th June. So first of all, let's start with the 6th June newspaper. So as it was a Sunday, so very few news were there. One major article was about preponement of ethanol blending targets. So what we had was that ethanol is a biofuel. Ethanol can be created from biofuels, and this can be mixed in petrol or diesel. Previously, we had a target that we would achieve 20% blending of ethanol in this fuel by 2030. This was our previous target. However, Honorable Prime Minister has preponed this target, and from the target now is that 20% blending would be achieved by 2025. Why it has been done is because we have been able to make enough improvements in this regard in the past 7 years. This announcement was made along with the along with a release of the report of an interministerial committee related to the biofuels. So what are advantages of ethanol mixing into the petrol or diesel? So first advantage is that it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions because it is a carbon neutral technology. First a crop is made and then a fuel is made out of it. So net zero emissions are emitted out of this one. Second aspect is that it will reduce our import dependence because most of our petrol or diesel or petroleum products are imported from outside the countries as our own resources are very limited. Bioethanol mixing higher percentage, so more would be produced in India, resulting in reduction in imports. Third benefit of this is that it will tackle agricultural waste. So agricultural waste that is created that can be used for ethanol production, and then ethanol can be mixed into petrol or diesel. Fourth benefit is that sugar prices. So during so as we know, if there is a bumper harvest of sugar, as sugar canes are more planted, then it results in crash of the sugar prices. In such cases, if there is a mechanism to convert the sugar cane into ethanol, so the demand of sugarcane would still be there, resulting in the strengthening of the sugar prices. So this would be an advantage of greater ethanol mixing. However, there are certain issues also. First of all, that at the same time, one more advantage is that farmers will get more income. Farmer income will improve as the prices of sugarcane are administered prices, and these sugarcane raw material is procured by oil marketing companies. However, there are challenges also. First of all, traditional challenges like technology are also there, but there is an issue with regard to sustainability. Approximately 87% of ethanol that is produced in India are from sugar. As we know, sugarcane is a water guzzling crop, and right now India is also a water stressed country. So continuing with sugarcane as a primary source for ethanol production would not be feasible in the long run. So let's move on to the next one. So next article that is of significance is titled "Sports Press Meetings: Why It is Often Loved." So the issue of the sports press meeting has come into limelight on account of the incident involving Naomi Osaka. So she was suffering from some mental illness like depression or maybe some other issues also. Because of that, she decided that she would not be giving press meetings. As at press meetings, these journalists they ask very intriguing question, and this makes a person to doubt about oneself. So Naomi Osaka decided that she would not be giving these press interviews. Uh, this resulted in disagreement with sports authorities, and finally Naomi Osaka has decided to skip the French Open. So this has opened debates. In fact, many fans have supported Naomi Osaka right to privacy, and criticism of French organizing authorities are also there. At the same time, there is criticism about how a press covers sports persons, making them conscious about their routine, and very intriguing questions, very bland and at times insensitive questions are asked from Naomi Osaka. The article here, however, takes a different perspective. According to it, that while doing this, the perspective of press is also not taken into account. At times, what happens is that these persons do not treat the press very nicely. That is also a reality. Plus, it is a function of the press people to provide information to the public. So, criticizing them for asking the questions would not be fair. At the same time, many sports persons want that they should be interviewed by the press people. So all these factors. So there is a other side to this event also. So with this, 6th June newspaper is completed. Let's move on to the 7th June. So 7th June. So first article is with regard to the 6-year-old Kashmiri girl complaint. So as we all know, 6-year Kashmiri girl, Mahiru Irfan, she complained online, and Lieutenant LG, Lieutenant General of Jammu and Kashmir UT, he decided to take up the grievance of Mahirul Irfan. So it is a nice example of building social capital. So using this as background, the author is trying to explain various facets of social capital. So author is quoting a book called Bowling Alone, and it is a famous book written by Robert Putnam. Robert Putnam. So where it details what is social capital. So social capital, according to Robert Putnam, it is basically social networks or norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arise from there that lead to positive outcomes. So these networks, then these trusts, and then the reciprocity. So all these things, when present in a society, results in positive outcome for this society. So in a way, the social networks act as a capital for the society. This is called social capital. There are various types of social capital. Two types are being mentioned here. One is this bonding social capital, and one is bridging social capital. So what is bridging social capital? This is a more better social capital. Bonding social capital is that people with same socioeconomic background, same ethnicity, or say some other common denominator, they have a common interaction with each other. So example are religious charitable organizations, religious organizations are there. So it provides the bonding within these social groups. However, at times, like familiar ethnic religious organizations, so these are identity based and homogeneous groups which cooperate with each other to create the social capital. However, a better way would be a bridging social capital. What is bridging social capital? Bridging social capital is when dissimilar groups, there is a like uh, people from diverse background, they cooperate with each other, and the trust level between them increases because of which. So bridging social capital would be basically people with the diverse socio-economic backgrounds create social capital networks, and this enable transaction with wider number of unknown people. So with wider number of unknown people, uh, the networks are developed, resulting in bridging social capital. According to researchers, bridging social capital is provides uh, is more helpful for the society. It creates trust. It creates reduces the transaction cost. It has a wider network, and it has a wider reach as such. So this bridging socially network, it increases something called generalized trust. So what is generalized trust? So the idea of social capital is based on trust. If a person has a trust over other, then the cooperation would be more, the reciprocity would be more, networks would be more. So in bridging social capital, something called generalized trust is engendered. There is a different kind of trust also, which is called particularized trust. What is particularized trust? That a person has a trust in a person who a person knows that this is the ethnic or religious or familial background. So when bonding social capital would be having more of a particularized trust, while bridging trust social capital is having more of a generalized trust. Generalized trust would be that we don't know a person, we have unknown person, and we work for it. For the example is charitable organizations. Like COVID pandemic, many charitable organizations give food to the unknown street people living in the streets who have no access to the food. So that is generalized trust. So in a case of bridging social capital, this generalized trust is increased in the society. This creation of a generalized trust would result in a peaceful society. In fact, there are various terrorist organizations that they focus on they take advantage of lack of generalized trust in the society. See, they will say that if there is less trust in the society, they will milk those differences and would propagate extremist ideologies. So it is the duty of the state in order to promote generalized trust. By listening to a Kashmiri girl, LG, which is a youth, LG has increased the generalized trust in the society, and it is a step in in ensuring that more bridging social capital is created. Along with this, author also highlights that youth play a very critical role in order to generate this social capital, especially the bridging social capital. And the role of children is very much there. In fact, various international organizations like UNESCO, like United Nations, they have emphasized on involving children. Some examples are given. For example, UNICEF. UNICEF also works in this area. So UNICEF is working in Guatemala. So in order to investigate sexual violence against children, UNICEF is working in Guatemala with youth. So that has created social capital there. And one more case study is with regard to Zimbabwe, where UNICEF has developed a strategy to support children in conflict with the law through legal aid and social assistance. So we can say that social capital, if we engage with the youth, we engage with youth of a diverse socio-economic background, social capital in the country would increase. And this is a fine example where the complaints of Mahiru Irfan were taken by the administration and action was taken. This improves the social capital in our society, and these kind of steps should be loaded by the common people. Let's move on to the next article. The second article of 7th June is what would be the impact of COVID-19 on children. So first of all, there are concerns that the third wave would impact the children more. Why? Why? Because there is evidence in Singapore, similar kind of incident where more number of cases are happening in children is happening. At the same time, the point is that with regard to the vulnerability or rather susceptibility, both adults and children are equally susceptible, but adults, this second, uh, adults are having immunity right now. Why they are having immunity? Because during the second wave, majority of the people were adults. So those people who recovered from the infection, they develop an immunity. At the same time, vaccination is being done for adults only, 18 to 45 years of age or more than 45 years of age. So adults have greater amount of protection, while children are not having that kind of protection. So because of that, many people fear that the third wave would be impacting our children in a more bigger way. So what can be done? First of all, the parents have to take a special care of the children during this time. So what is the care? First of all, prevention. With regard to that, we have to put on the mask. However, it is recommended that only for children more than 2 years of age, mask should be put on because it's very difficult for a child less than 2 years of age to have a proper mask. Second would be again ensuring social distancing. So the role of parents are far more, and prompt treatment and all those facilities that have to be provided to the children should be provided by the parents proactively, and especially the mental health care. As we know that during the pandemic, this second wave, the lockdown was introduced there, and it has been a long time since the closure of these schools, and many of the schools are not opening. So because of that, there is a huge stress on parents. Then there is an issue of the orphaned children, how to deal with the orphaned children, what are the unique problems they are facing. So parents have to take care of children, especially with regard to this. One more thing that is mentioned here is that would there be a mental retardation or long-term impact of COVID on children? So there is data. So the data research is emerging that a significant proportion, I think, especially those who developed MISC. So what is this MISC? It is multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. MIS is multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. So it is a condition that is developing in children as a result of COVID infection. So these people, especially, these people are at increased risk of a long-term effect on development. In fact, 12% of the children have documented, 12% have documented neurological symptoms. So impact on the mental health would be maybe for a longer duration for the children. So with this, major articles of 7th June are done. Let's move on to the 8th June newspaper. 8th June. So the first is that after a huge criticism of the COVID vaccination policy, Center has come up with a new vaccination policy, new policy to do vaccination. So for that, Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, came on addressed the nation, and he fine-tuned the public, and he announced the new policy of vaccination along with extension of the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana for one more month in order to provide free food grade. So what are the changes with regard to vaccination policy? One more aspect is that Prime Minister has set out the context why the previous policy was used, and why there is a change to the previous centralized policy also. So according to Prime Minister, when the vaccination started from 16 January onwards, it was a centralized system where the center used to procure all the vaccines, and then it used to distribute to the states as per preset criteria in order to vaccinate frontline workers and people with comorbidities and those more than 45 years of age. However, with passage of time, various state governments said that it is very centralized, then there is a need of decentralized approach where the state government should be given a more say into the vaccine administration. And for that particular purpose, they said that there should not be a one size fits all approach, and India being such a large geography with the diverse requirements in diverse states, so it should be the states that should take the decisions. In view of those recommendations, the center decided to go for a 50-50 policy. However, later on it was realized that states were not able to procure these vaccines in a timely manner, resulting in supply side issues for the vaccination. Finally, now the government has decided that now center would procure the state. So what are the this new key changes that has been uh, uh, introduced in the vaccination policy? First of all, center will now procure 75% of vaccine produced, and 25% would be left for the private sector. And for the private sector, all mechanism would be there. Our center would buy 75%, and again the 50% of this would go to those people who are more than 45 years of age, and the rest 25% would be given to the states to vaccinate 18 to 45 years of people. Here, various criteria would be used in order to distribute the vaccine to the states. There would be some positive criteria and one negative criteria. One negative criteria is that those states having high vaccine wastage. So vaccine wastage is that whatever vaccine is being delivered, all this vaccine is not being put into all the people are not inoculated, and some of this is wasted. Some states like Chhattisgarh are having very high vaccine wastage, about 30%. So for a vaccination program, this high wastage is not, so generally it should be less than 1%, but 30% is too much. So this is a negative indicator. And second thing is about the certain positive indicator that are used to criteria that are used to, in fact, which are used to deal with this issue. So I think there was some issue because of that. The video was paused. Let's again start from here. So one is a negative criteria in order to dispute, that is vaccine wastage. There are three positive criteria. One is the population of the state, the caseload, and I think efficiency is a criteria, how efficiently these states are handling. So based on these criteria, the vaccine would be distributed to the states. This is the first change. Second would be, it was noticed that large hospitals were able to procure the vaccines, but smaller hospitals faced daunting task during this phase where they were not able to get the vaccine. So in order to ensure that small private hospitals also are able to get the vaccine, now a new system would be developed where state governments would be encouraged to, uh, to in a way, aggregate the demand. The demand of this, because of this aggregation of demand, there would be a empowerment of these small private hospitals. After demand aggregation, the center would procure for help these small private hospitals to get the vaccines. These are number of vaccines from the manufacturers. Third would be that these data at a district level would be available with regard to the supply of vaccines on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, how much vaccines will reach a particular district? This would be made available to the district administration, so that accordingly the arrangements for vaccinating the people would be made. At the same time, one more change is that there would be a on-site registration for vaccination. Also, along with that, there would be something called transferable electronic vouchers. So these would be issues to those people who are unable to get the vaccine. So this is to deal with the equity issue. So how it would be done is that a person, if he wants a particular other person to be vaccinated, he will issue electronic voucher, and this would be issued by RBI. So RBI will be issuing this electronic voucher, which would be non-transferable from one person to another, and that other person would be able to get vaccination. So this is done in order to encourage social sectors, NGOs to provide vaccination to those people, vulnerable people who are not able to get this. Sixth is that greater flexibility has been given to the state governments with regard to deciding the priority groups. Within 15 to 45 years of age, the priority groups would be decided by the state governments to vaccinate. And finally, with regard to the pricing now the cap has been there. Plus, for private sector hospital, they can only charge rupees 150 as a service charge, not beyond that. Second would be that their prices would be available, updated on the CoWIN platform. And at the same time, our expert group, with regard to pricing of these vaccines itself, expert committee would give a suggestion, and in line with that, negotiations would be made with the Serum Institute of India and Bharat Biotech in order to, if there is a need for a price renegotiation with these vaccine manufacturers. So this has been the idea with regard to the new vaccination policy. Next article is written by Madhav Godbole, and it is about the center's decision to amend the pension rules. Now, pension rules have been amended now, which prohibits retired officers from intelligence organizations to write any to write any publication or any material. So any publication and any material. So if a person has to write any publication or any material, then he would have to take a permission from the intelligence organization concerned. So then only that person would be allowed to write or participate in giving its knowledge. So this move has been criticized. So according to the author also, similar kind of thing was done previously also in 2008, but after various criticism, this was taken back. So why this is problematic? It is first, because these first of all, the point is that very few number of people who are retired, few people participate in providing in writing in the public with regard to intelligence agency. So with such a small number of people, the problem with regard to the intelligence can be tackled individually easy. Why to have a broad framework to deal with such a small number of people? It is one of the criticism. Second criticism, it's like it's a muzzling dissent. So government would not allow the people to even criticize. Constructive criticism would not be allowed to these provisions. Fourth issue is that there is so much discretion given to the head of the department, and there is a high scope of diverse interpretations. Why there would be diverse interpretations would be that first of all, there are so many organizations involved. Second is that the wording is very vague. Any publication, any material. So this will create confusion, and in fact, there would be high-handedness by the officers also. It would be better, rather than each individual organization deciding on it, there should be a separate body should be created, which would use objective standard in order to clear a particular publications. So this is the article about. Let's move on to the third article. This is about foster care. So again, we know that during this pandemic, the problem of orphan children has highlighted the unique challenges that children of our country are facing. In this regard, so this author is saying that we should look into something called foster care. So what are the various mechanisms through which care is provided to children? One is institutionalized care. So institutionalized care to the children, especially orphan children, and second is adoption, and third is foster care. So adoption and then foster care. What is institutionalized care? So we have various institutions, like some organizations there, the orphan children will stay there, like in a hostel, and the care would be provided. Globally, there has been a move from institutionalized care to non-institutionalized care, because now it is seen, it is said that it is a fundamental right of the children to live in a family. Research is also saying that the people who are living in institutions, they suffer from various mental and physical problems, and they are not able to integrate with the society in a better way. In fact, their complete comprehensive development doesn't happen. At the same time, these institutions are highly overcrowded, and there is huge corruption in there, and even there's some very unethical activities are also being done in this institutionalized care. So now other option available is adoption, and one is foster care. So adoption would be a legal adoption. So a couple who is not having children, you would have to go through a procedure where CARA, Central Adoption Resource Agency, will help these couples in order to get a child adopted. So now this adoption process, first problem with this adoption process is it's very lengthy, and in fact on an average 3,000 to 4,000 children are, or only this small number of children are getting adopted. And third is that there is hesitancy among the couples to adopt these children. Why there is hesitancy is because, first of all, in case of a couple is not having a child, then it is fine. But if a couple is having child, then they would have to gain legal rights to the adopted children. So because of that, these families are not adopting children. So other alternative would be foster care. In foster care, what would happen is that these couples, they will adopt a child, but there would be no responsibility on these parents to give them legal rights. Inheritance rights would not be there. At the same time, there would be regular follow-up visits by the state organizations, organization, in order to ensure that foster care is provided properly to the child. So this is an advantage, because in case of adoption, follow-up is generally not done, and that is not that much rigorous. Plus, at the same time, one issue that has been highlighted recently with regard to the foster care is, first of all, the awareness about it is very less. So, in fact, the author gives an example that Juvenile Justice Act, so it incorporated the provisions of foster care. So what happened is that there is now what happened recently was that there were some migrant workers, and one was Rani, and some other one more migrant worker was there. She expired. When she expired, her children, Rani was a friend of this female, and these orphan children, their care was taken by the Rani. However, she belongs to a very poor socioeconomic background. This news reached the district administration. Because of that, these children got separated from Rani and put into the institutional care. Clearly, and the reason given was that the economic the Rani is having very low economic resources. So this is a clear-cut discrimination on the basis of economic parameters, where people with low economic background are not able to give care to these children. However, if we see scientifically, children given care by parents of similar socio-economic background would result in children having mostly similar, the adjustment disorder that children may face would not be that big, because similar kind of care would be provided and same socio-economic background would be there. So we have to focus on this, and going forward, we should, in order to tackle the problem of orphan children out of the COVID, now we should, this is the right time to encourage foster care. The state government should provide financial assistance to those families which are providing the foster care. Then the administration, these various child welfare committees, these needs to be strengthened so that the follow-up of children under foster care is ensured. So this can be a sustainable mechanisms in order to solve the issue of orphan children. So this article deals with this. Next one is C. Raja Mohan is writing about, for India, G7 is an opportunity to expand ties with West. So what this article says? This article says that now G7 meeting is happening at Cornwall in UK, and this can decide the contours of a global compact between India and the West. So what is the context of G7 meeting? First context is that West was seen flailing during this COVID response due to the America First policy of Donald Trump. So Joe Biden administration, the new president of the United States, wants that West should be back. West is back. America is back. So West wants to play a proactive role here again. The second point is, the second context is that China is rising. So China is rising. So because of that, there is concern in the West about the impact the rise of China would be having on the global geopolitics. So these are the contexts, and then the world has suffered from the COVID pandemic. So in this background, this meeting is happening in Cornwall. India is also invited, and Indian Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, will join digitally through digital route, and the meeting will be there. For Joe Biden, this is his first overseas visit after taking the office. So, we should remember this is not the first time India is participating in G7 meeting. So, but this time the things are different because UK Prime Minister Mr. Johnson, he says that he want to create an alliance of the coalition of democratic global coalition of democratic countries. So all these democratic countries would be coming together in order to ensure a uh, global uh, framework in order to deal with the issue the world is facing. So in this regard, in India, this is an opportunity for India to expand its relationship with the West. So right now, what is happening is that due to two reasons. First of all, that China's aggressiveness in the border. So we have seen multiple issues. Then border issues are happening. In fact, Ladakh fighting happened. Then the issues of high imports, and these imports are from China in India, and these imports are making our domestic companies uncompetitive. So these imports are having very bad impact on our own companies. Because of this, India wants to move away from China-led economic initiatives. For example, India decided to not join RCEP. At the same time, India is improving its ties with the West, both US and the Europe. Various trade agreements are being planned. The idea of Indo-Pacific has gained momentum. The Quad initiative is at the center of it. So at the same time, the trade relationship with the West are improving. So for India, it would be a nice moment to further improve its relationship with West and with the West. However, this meeting in itself would not solve all the problems, because there would be some divergences between India and the West also. So in order to change this opportunity into a valid solution, we would have to go for a long-term engagement with the West and USA in order to develop these coalitions, and areas of convergence should be used as a base in order to develop and broad base our relationship with the West. So this is what C. Raja Mohan is saying about the G7 meeting. Next is that there is an article with where uh, uh, FDA has approved Biogen's Alzheimer drug. Alzheimer drug. So what is Alzheimer? It is uh, it is a disease which happens in generally in old age. where beta amyloid protein gets deposited into the brain, which creates dementia. In fact, 60% of dementia, that is loss of memory, is on account of Alzheimer's disease. So after 2003, this is the first drug, like 17 years, a drug has been approved, and the name of this drug is aducanumab. So it is a monoclonal. This is an monoclonal antibody which would be targeting this beta amyloid protein. Its brand name would be Aduhelm. So this is a news, and FDA has given approval to this drug for in order to ensure that in early stages progression does not happen of the disease concern. Next is that next article is about performance grading index. So Education Ministry has recently released a performance grading index, which uses multiple surveys in order to give various points. Something some 1,000 points are given over 70 parameters to various states, and states are given these points, and there is no ranking, but the points are given to states in order to know the best practices, in order to encourage states to adopt the best practices, improve up the ladder. So this is based on various surveys like National Achievement Survey, then UDICE survey. UDICE survey is there. So multiple other midday meal data from midday meal is taken. So a comprehensive data indicators are provided. So what is the broad learning from this PGI survey is that in the infrastructure part, most of the states are doing very well, but with the regard to governance, teacher training, teacher attendance, these states, many of the states are lagging, and they need to improve the school education governance. So with this, the newspaper of 8th June also comes to an end. So let's move on to the 9th. So first article is written by Upender Bakshi. How to protect human rights in digital era. So according to Upender Bakshi, two developments. One is the Supreme Court order, and one is United Nations Human Rights Commission's Special Rapporteur Irene Khan report on disinformation and freedom of speech and expression. Supreme Court recently said that those people against whom some people are commenting on social media, and on the basis of that some administration or state governments are taking action against them in order to stop this. Proactive measures are being implemented by Supreme Court. In fact, a circular has been issued to the all district administration and even to the state governments, and proactive coercive action would be taken against those authorities for contempt of court in case the people are harassed for providing the information. Second is with regard to disinformation. So one is what is disinformation and what is misinformation. Disinformation is willfully giving false information in order to create social harm. The intention is social harm. Our misinformation, it can be unknown. So we have to differentiate the two, and this information should be stopped. This in order to ensure that people exercise their human right of freedom of speech and expression in the best possible way. Next article is about by Deep Singh Puri, where greeners, how Indian cities are becoming more greener is being emphasized. So first it is the Swachh Bharat mission. It enabled reduction of defecation, and many cities are often, in fact, most of all the cities are often defecation free. Solid and liquid management is an integral part of it. Then smart cities, which data is giving how smart solutions have been applied across the across various cities. Then Amrut mission, where basic infrastructure is provided to these cities. Then Green Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana urban component, where various new technologies are being used in order to produce housing, steps in housing sector are being taken. All these are making a reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions of these cities, and making the cities more cleaner. So with this article, I think the 9th June newspaper also comes to end. Let's move on to the 10th June. So in 10th June, one editorial is there for this joyride to the space. So this is interesting one. So Jeff Bezos, he has decided that he will, along with his brother, will go on the moon for a joyride. And so in this regard, it has been, this editorial is written. So the context of space race is given to 1969 when Neil Armstrong went to the moon, and he famously called a giant leap forward, even though the visit, uh, this this project was done by NASA in order to show technology. Also, the elements of cold rivalry was there, but this was a moment of unification for the whole of the world. Global unity movement was there. However, now what we are witnessing, that those people who are having more money, so equity dimension is also coming into a space race. People having more money are able to go to the space for having joyride. So this is great. This is no more the idea of space exploration, space technologies is no more a unifying factor for the humanity. So this article details this thing, this editorial. So it also mentions about the RAND model of individual excellence and individual emissions. So that was there. So second article, let's move on to the second article. So, so it is about review the deal. So what is the context? This is an editorial again. Review the deal. So right now, G7 finance ministers have come to an agreement that there would be a global minimum corporate tax of 15%. So why it has been done? Reason behind this step. First of all, the revenues of various governments are reducing. The revenues are reducing because these multinational companies are using various loopholes in order to give minimum amount of the tax possible in various jurisdictions, and this loophole is there. Plus, there are some certain tax havens that are emerging where these companies are not even paying taxes. So because of this, these industrialized countries have come to an agreement that there should be a global minimum corporate tax of 15%. So this is a good thing in the context that now these MNCs would not be able to go for activities like base erosion and profit shifting or other things which would enable them to take benefit of the tax loopholes. However, for a developing country like India, this can create problems also. First is because taxing is a sovereign right. So if the international organization setting rules on the about a sovereign right of a state, it goes against the sovereignty of the state. Second is that India is also using tax incentive in order to encourage for these MNC companies to come to India. So this element of tax incentivization would go with this global minimum tax regime. And third issue would be with regard to uh, this step will benefit whom. So it will certainly benefit the developed countries more because these multinational companies are mostly headquarters in these developed countries only. So any untaxed income would be going to these companies only. So in a way, this step would benefit more the developed countries and less to the developing countries like India. So India should ask for these G7 countries to review the deal, and all the concerns of developing countries should be taken into account while coming with such kind of a deal. So this was the second article. Then now let's move on to the third one. So this is an editorial about states in the union. So how the states' rights are issue in the present government also. So what the author is saying that when Prime Minister went for mm, address to the nation, it he put blame on the state governments for the faltering of the vaccination drive of the country, and this clearly goes against the federal spirit. States' rights goes into this. However, the history has shown that the idea of state right has not been. So this editorial is about state rights. So as we have talked also that the Prime Minister address goes against states' right. According to the newspaper also, the history of state rights has not been as glamorous as being seen. So it's like on the same lines only, and it has gone a long distance. Initially, the rights were completely neglected because there was same party in the at the union level and at the state level, both level. In 1959, first evidence of neglect of state rights can be seen, where the Kerala government was dismissed by the union government, headed by no other than the first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. So Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru dismissed the Kerala government in 1959. So an elected non-Congress government was there. Later on, what happened? This Article 356 is kept on being misused. In fact, President's rule was imposed on very flimsy grounds, even during Indira Gandhi times. However, this misuse of Article 356 came to a reduction on account of two things. First was Sarkari Commission. The Sarkari Commission and then SR Bomai case. All these steps, along with emergence of coalition governments empowered the state governments, and the state governments uh, became conscious about the state rights, and even union started giving heed to the state rights. In fact, when the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi was Gujarat Chief Minister, he also focused on state rights. But the present instance of blaming for the state governments for the failure of mm, vaccine supply goes against the long the gains that have been made in the arena of state rights. So this editorial talks about this. Next is an editorial that is written by Shashi Tharoor about baseless and barrick. India must outlook conversion therapy. So, so what is a conversion therapy? So this is basically inhuman, unscientific therapy where a person's gender orientation is changed. Research has shown that gender orientation at times may not be in alignment with the biological sex of a person. Look, some people like LGBTQIA plus. These community members sometimes a society sees them as as something abnormal from the heterosexual nature of gender identity that that most of the people have. So some medical practitioners also, and at times some quacks also use very harsh measures, which is called conversion therapy, which they believe would be used to change LGBTQIA plus to the heterosexual nature, the so-called normal told by the society as such. Recently, Madras High Court has, in fact, banned the conversion therapy. So this will make Tamil Nadu the first state in the country where conversion therapy is banned. So Sashi Tharoor is saying that rights of LGBTQIA plus community has improved in a improved by a quantum jump across the centuries. In fact, Article 377, that article, no more criminalizes consensual homosexual acts. Also, we have various judgments of the Supreme Court, various activities by the uh, state governments which encourage integration of LGBTQIA plus community into the wider society. So first of all, we know what is LGBTQIA. We can in fact expand this. L means lesbian, G means gay, B means bisexual, T means transsexual, Q means query, I means intersex, A means asexual, plus mean other uh, other than what are written here. So what is this article saying about? So this article also details uh, certain uh, things that we can quote in our answers. The first thing that this article quotes is about how this conversion therapy had its impact, right? Where in fact, wait a second, Anjana Harish, a member of LGBTQIA community, committed suicide because of the harsh mechanisms used in conversion therapy. So clearly this conversion therapy is inhuman and is, according to researchers, is having long-term side effects in as much as 98% of cases. So there is a need to ban conversion therapy. Existing laws, especially Mental Health Care Act 2017, is unable to tackle the conversion therapy menace. First of all, uh, even though Mental Health Care Act requires that consent of the individual should be taken in order to give healthcare services to the person, mental health care services. However, at times, the members of LGBTQIA plus community, when told by health practitioners, they start feeling that they are abnormal and they can go for conversion therapy. So the provision of consent may not be as valid in this particular circumstances. Also, mental health care act applies to mental health illnesses, but the reality is that the LGBTQ this gender identity is not an illness as such. So provisions of Mental Health Care Act 2017 may not be applicable in case of conversion therapy. Therefore, there is a need to clearly outlaw this therapy, and the government should launch various schemes in order to encourage that this menace should be stopped. So that is the uh, article by Shashi Tharoor. Next article is on reforms and public expenditure. So this is by Vivek Debrod. So according to Vivek Debrod, generally what happens is that we scrutinize the actions of executive more, while the actions of judiciary and parliament are not scrutinized by the public. It is our duty as citizens, well-aware citizens, to scrutinize activities of judiciary and parliament. Parliament also legislature, so parliament and state legislatures. Within this spectrum, the scrutiny of parliament is more, while the state legislature's scrutiny is very low. So we can see it in the form of how 15th Finance Commission, how much response it generated, the debates around the union budget, but there is no talk about state budgets, no talk about state legislative sittings, what kind of laws they are passing, no talk about the recommendation of State Finance Commission. So in this regard, PRS legislation, it has come with an initiative where they would be they have compiled the state legislature various state legislatures activities during the last year. And this is a very welcome step because this will generate public awareness about the state legislature, and slowly public will start demanding the kind of awareness, the kind of response that is expected out of bills of the state legislation. So taking this as a background, Vivek Devaroy is highlighting various issues plaguing state legislature. First issue is about uh, the fact that there is a state legislative assembly and a state legislative council. So there are some states which are having legislative councils. For example, UP is having, Bihar is having, Karnataka is having, then other states like Telangana, then Andhra Pradesh, these states are having legislative council, the bicameralism. The reason for this is, first of all, a colonial legacy is there. Second is that, mm, second is that there is, this is certainly colonial legacy, but second is that some people who are not able to get elected in legislative assembly, they are able to find seat in legislative council. However, overwhelming consensus is that legislative councils, first of all, delay the decisions of legislative assembly. In fact, Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly has asked the state and this union government in order or union parliament to ask the parliament to scrap the legislative council of the state. Second is that it is run on public expenditure. So it is a wasteful use of public expenditures. So all these things are there. Recently, the issue of legislative council again becomes important because West Bengal uh, legislature, where there was no legislative council, is demanding the legislative council. So again, this issue comes. Second is that various bills that are passed by the state legislature. First of all, there is a huge variation in number of bills passed across the states. Then within these, they are hardly discussed. Discussion on these bills is very low in the state legislatures, and within the sittings in state legislature on an average are lesser than in case of the parliament. So these are the issues that are plaguing state legislature, and the activity, the step by PRS legislation to venture into this field is a welcome one. And as a citizen, we should again be more responsive and more aware about what is happening on our just legislative council, and demand more responsibility by these institutions. So next article that we can discuss about 10th June would be, check. So El Salvador. So now El Salvador, it is a country, it has decided that Bitcoin would be used as a legal tender. So what is a legal tender? So it's a cryptocurrency. What is Bitcoin? It's a cryptocurrency which is using the technology called blockchain technology. However, we should be clear that El Salvador is a dollarized economy. So what is a dollarized economy? So it is a very small country. So instead of having its own money, so El Salvador uses the US dollar as a unit of transaction. So now Bitcoin would be another mechanism through which the citizens of El Salvador can transact. So that is one thing. What is the lesson for India? For India, the lesson is that the technology behind Bitcoin is very important, and we should arm our entrepreneurs to create and work on Bitcoin and not ban the currency as such, because there are, in fact, discussions of having coming with a bill which will ban this Bitcoin currency. Rather, we should go for a regulation so that a fine balance is achieved where entrepreneurship is encouraged, because digital currency is gaining momentum across the world. So with this 10th June newspaper comes to an end, let's move on to the 11th June newspaper. So the first article is about, first news is about gender divide. So All India Survey for Higher Education. Its report has been released, and in 2017, what happened in BSc courses? And